After being reborn, I completely avoided Alex Smith's life path. When he went to the northern provincial capital, I went south to work. When he came south for research, I went to the capital for further education. In my previous life, while he enjoyed romance and revelry outside, I raised our son alone. Yet, until the moment I died, both he and our son relentlessly pressured me to divorce him. I wonder, in this life, without me working tirelessly behind him, taking care of his parents, will he still be able to live so carefree? No one knows that I've been reborn. I tightly clenched the letter in my hand, overwhelmed with excitement. The words on the letter resonated deeply with my heart. Seeing how emotional I was, the postal worker couldn't help but ask, "Aren't you getting married in a few days? Why are you writing a letter to head south and join a textile factory?" Yes, in everyone's eyes, Alex Smith is the perfect marriage candidate. Everyone believes I don't deserve him. Handsome, well-mannered, and already admitted to medical school at a young age. He's now about to be promoted and head to the provincial capital. If it weren't for his parents insisting he marry someone before leaving for the provincial capital, such a good fortune would never have come my way. I looked at the postal worker with determination. What's so good about a woman spending her whole life dependent on a man, living a life of submission? I want to carve out a future of my own. I thought the worker might mock my ideals, but to my surprise, he wholeheartedly agreed, looking at me with admiration. "You're absolutely right. I'm working hard to save money too. I even plan to apply for college." We chatted excitedly for a long time. On the way back, however, a wave of sadness washed over me as memories of my tragic past life surfaced. In my previous life, I never even had a chance to leave this small county. I had refused my cousin's invitation to go south for work because my father had sold me to the Smith family as a bride for $50. The price of a bicycle. My entire life was sold away for $50, and I was expected to toil without complaint. Alex's parents forcibly bought me as their daughter-in-law. When I first met him, he treated me well, and I naively thought we'd have a happy marriage. But soon after, he frequently brought Emily Taylor home for meals. In that life, I never found anything suspicious. Every time he brought her over, I entertained them with care. When I became pregnant, Alex left for the provincial capital, leaving me to care for our child and his parents alone. Over time, he grew busier, rarely returning home. His position rose, and his work location kept changing, always farther away. Yet Emily, now a nurse, could follow him wherever he went. She even brought her own elderly mother along. Meanwhile, Alex's parents relied entirely on me. I single-handedly raised our young child while caring for his frail parents. Before Alex and Emily returned, my son was obedient and close to me. But after their visits, everything changed. They'd take my son to see exciting places and buy him new toys and sweets. Gradually, my son grew distant and estranged. By the time he was an adult, he barely contacted me once a year. One day, after taking care of my in-laws, I went out to buy a newspaper. The vendor happily pointed at the paper and said, "Your son's new wife is beautiful." I don't remember what else he said because I was frozen, staring at the photo on the page. In the photo, my son and his wife were kneeling, serving tea to Alex and Emily. The four of them looked like a happy family, and I, his real mother, hadn't even known about the wedding. That year, my father-in-law passed away suddenly from high blood pressure. The shock left my mother-in-law paralyzed. It was only then that I saw my son, Alex, and Emily after a long absence. I thought my son would offer me some explanation. Instead, he lashed out at me. "I already heard from my godmother. If it weren't for Grandpa disliking her and insisting on buying you as a bride, Dad and Godmother would have been married long ago. Now that Grandpa's gone, I advise you to divorce Dad and stop clinging to him. You, a woman who's never even stepped out of this county, don't deserve my father." All those years I endured countless hardships with Alex. I never once complained. I never asked him for anything. When my son was sick, and a flood ruined the crops, I worked tirelessly to salvage the fields, cared for my injured mother-in-law, and carried my sick child to the hospital late at night. As he lay on my back, he whispered, "Mom, I'll be sure to take care of you in the future," my son once promised me. But now, He dismissed me as useless. And he too was the one urging me to divorce his father. By the time I was nearly 50, my body had been worn down from giving birth without proper recovery and years of overwork. Decades of sacrifice amounted to nothing but hearing the words, "You're not worthy," come from the mouth of the very child I had brought into this world. When I discussed the divorce with Alex Smith, I made it clear, fine, but I want half of the family's assets. I had poured my heart and soul into this family, and that was what I deserved. But the three of them, Alex, Emily Taylor, and my son, became furious. They hurled the ugliest insults at me, calling me shameless and accusing me of doing nothing, yet wanting to take what was theirs. That winter was bitterly cold. I fell seriously ill, but none of the hospitals in the county would treat me. Every door I knocked on was shut in my face. I knew exactly who was behind it. They wanted to force me into submission, to leave the marriage with nothing. Before I died, my son visited me one last time. He threatened me. If I agreed to the divorce, he would arrange for my treatment. He even promised to return the next day for my answer. As he left, he took the last bit of coal in the house with him. But I didn't live to see the next day. That night was colder than I had imagined, and I froze to death in that frigid darkness. My only regret before dying was marrying Alex Smith, giving birth to my son, and not going south with my cousin to build a better life. Instead, I had wasted my life on these heartless people, clutching a keepsake from my late mother. I died full of bitterness and hatred that night. But heaven took pity on me and granted me a second chance. This time, I was determined to live an extraordinary life, free and independent of anyone. The first thing I did when I got home was destroy the letter, keeping only a train ticket, a ticket for a journey set for 2 weeks later. In this small county, tickets to the south were rare, only available twice a month. I carefully put the ticket away. This ticket was my key to escaping a life of misery. 15 days. Just 15 days. And I could start over. Before I even had time to prepare dinner, Alex returned with Emily Taylor and his elderly mother. Their voices and laughter arrived before they did. "What's for dinner, sis?" Emily called out brightly. "Oh, and this coat hanging at the door. So pretty. Can I try it on?" I froze. My mother had passed away when I was young, and my father had wasted his life gambling and drinking. I grew up wearing hand-me-downs and eating whatever scraps neighbors could spare. That coat, a gift from my cousin when she heard I was getting married, was the only piece of new clothing I had ever owned. Alex's voice came next. "If you like it, have Anna pack it up for you to take back tonight." Furious, I burst out of my room, grabbed the coat from Emily's hands, and held it tightly behind me. Alex looked at me in confusion. "It's just a coat. Why are you being so stingy?" I stared at the two of them, disappointment flooding my heart. They acted like bandits. Emily had so many beautiful clothes. Why did she have to take the only nice thing I owned? Was I their maid? "What nonsense are you spouting?" Alex snapped. "You know you're used to doing these chores. Emily's too delicate for that kind of work. Why are you making such a fuss?" Emily, the ever-coddled one, put on her pitiful act. With tears brimming in her eyes, she hid behind Alex, looking hurt. "It's okay, Alex. If she doesn't want to let me have it, that's fine. I just thought it would be fun to try on a red coat for once. I didn't mean to upset her. Please don't blame me." As soon as she started crying, Alex, as always, sided with her. Without hesitation, he yanked the coat from my grasp and handed it to Emily. "Take it. I'm still the head of this household, and it's just a coat. Anything you want, you can have." With that, he led Emily toward the bedroom, pushing me aside when I tried to block the door. As Emily passed me, she shot me a smug, taunting smile that Alex couldn't see. On his way to the room, Alex called out, "What's for dinner tonight? I don't smell anything cooking." When he saw the empty dining table, his face darkened. "I don't understand why my mom picked you to be my wife. You don't even have dinner ready when I get home from work." I glanced at the calendar on the wall. There were only 15 days left. 15 days until I could start a new life. "So," I told Alex, "I was out taking care of errands today. You'll have to manage dinner yourself." Before I could start cooking, I casually said, "I'll be busy in a couple of days." So why don't you just eat at work instead? Alex scoffed, his voice dripping with sarcasm. What could a barely literate woman who's about to get married possibly have to do? I quickly made up an excuse. I need to go up the mountain to pay respects to my mother. I paused, then added, I'm getting married soon. And my late mother deserves to know. Doesn't she? To know that my father sold me. And your family bought me with money, forcing me into this marriage. Do you really think I'm not worthy of you? I lifted my head and looked at Alex, who was a head taller than me, my voice full of mockery. He chuckled, his tone sharp. Of course not. Who doesn't say I'm already marrying above my station? But instead of addressing my words, Alex fixated on something else entirely. He narrowed his eyes and pressed on. Didn't you go after me because you admired me? Didn't you have your father approach my family for this marriage? His logic baffled me, and I simply bowed my head, choosing not to reply. Seeing my silence, Alex grew furious, dragging Emily Taylor behind him. He stormed out of the house, leaving behind a harsh comment. I can't control you anymore. Go worship whoever you want. I don't care. Despite spending decades with Alex in my past life, I realized I still didn't understand him. I had no idea what had caused today's outburst. But it didn't matter. This suited me perfectly. Over the next few days, Alex didn't come home during the day, giving me plenty of time to handle my own affairs. What I was working on could decide the fate of my future. It wasn't illegal, but I had to do it discreetly, away from the Smith family's eyes. During this time, I also bought a stack of self-study books and spent my evenings reading and learning. Once I moved south, this knowledge would be invaluable. At night, I developed a habit of studying while ignoring Alex and Emily. For some reason, Alex's behavior suddenly shifted. One evening, he sat beside me and struck up a conversation. We're getting married soon, and I've never asked about your preferences. What do you like? Is there a style of furniture you want? I can have a new set made for you. I stared at him, confused. In my past life, I didn't even get a single new piece of furniture when we married. Everything was second-hand. Why was he now offering to make a new set? Noticing my puzzled expression, Alex grabbed my hand and said, Come with me. I'll show you something. He pulled me out of the house with surprising strength. Our workplace just finished building a batch of new houses for distribution. I'm eligible for one. And if I get it, it'll be our new home. This triggered a memory from my previous life. Yes, there had been new housing back then, too. But Alex never told me about it. I only heard from neighbors that he was assigned a house, which he then gave to Emily and her mother. He hadn't even asked for my opinion as his wife. Alex dragged me around town for quite some time, but instead of buying anything for me, he kept pointing out items, saying, Emily would like this. I'll take it back for her. Each time, he glanced at me, as if trying to provoke me, but I kept my composure. There were only 10 days left until I could leave. I couldn't afford any mishaps now. I obediently followed him, quietly carrying the bags without a word. Still, somehow, I managed to upset him. Suddenly, Alex threw all the bags at me and said, I just remembered. I promised to meet Emily this afternoon. You can head back by yourself. Even as he said this, he kept glancing back at me as he walked away, as if waiting for me to call him back. But I had already made up my mind to leave. Why would I stop him? Once he was gone, I returned home and finished tidying up my preparations. I knew the Smith family wouldn't let me leave easily since they had paid for me. So, I sold my late mother's keepsake and gathered the scattered wages I'd earned from odd jobs. Amazingly, I managed to save over $50. I used some of the money to buy health supplements for Alex's parents, slipping the remaining $50 into the package. Even though they hadn't treated me well in my past life, I didn't want to owe anyone anything. After all, Alex's mother had taken me in and pulled me out of the misery of my birth family, even if the Smith household became another kind of hell. When I visited Alex's mother with the supplements, her face lit up with joy. My mother-in-law spent the entire afternoon urging me to marry Alex Smith quickly, saying she couldn't wait to have a grandson. I only smiled and didn't respond. I had no intention of ever giving the Smith family a grandson. Just thinking about my son's ungratefulness in my past life made my head throb. Who said having children would ensure someone cared for you in old age? For me, It felt more like raising a son to kill his mother. After politely chatting with my mother-in-law for the afternoon, I finally managed to excuse myself. However, on my way home, I came across a man and a high school girl who appeared to be in a relationship. In this town, teachers were strict about preventing early romantic relationships among students. Even after school hours, there were teachers patrolling near the school. I saw a teacher with a flashlight yelling at the pair in the corner. "Hey, you! Which class are you in? Call your parents right now." I didn't plan to stop and watch the drama. I quickened my pace to leave. But to my surprise, the boy shouted my name. "Anna Shun." Hearing my name, I turned back and took a closer look. Under the dim light, I hadn't seen clearly before. But now I realized this wasn't some random young man with a high school girl. It was Alex Smith and Emily Taylor, who was dressed in a school uniform to appear younger. The teacher quickly realized they weren't students. And in his frustration, he slipped on the icy ground and fell. It was dinner time, and the commotion immediately attracted neighbors. A crowd quickly formed, buzzing with interest. "Well, what kind of game is this?" someone muttered. "These young people sure know how to have fun." Even after reliving my life, I couldn't handle such an embarrassing and ridiculous scene. My first instinct was to run away. It was too humiliating. But fate had other plans. Someone in the crowd recognized me and shouted, "Isn't that Anna Shin? You know these two, don't you? Come on, tell us what's going on." I was stuck, surrounded by curious faces. Their eyes bore into me as if trying to dig out every detail. In the end, Alex stepped in to defuse the situation. He yelled, "Everyone move along. What's so funny? Go home and eat your dinner." As he spoke, he took off his coat and draped it over Emily's head, shielding her from view. He escorted her out of the crowd and onto a bus, leaving me standing there awkwardly. The two of them caught the bus back home but didn't wait for me. I had to take the next one. By the time I returned, they were already sitting at the table, laughing and feeding each other as if they were the happiest couple in the world. When Emily saw me walk in, she looked surprised. "Oh, you're back so soon, sister." I let out a cold laugh and stared at her. "What? Did you expect me to sleep outside because of you too?" Alex stepped in to defend her. "As usual, she's just a young girl who doesn't know better. Don't make things hard for her. A school uniform makes her a young girl? Why not dress her in baby clothes and call her a toddler?" I shot back. Emily immediately burst into tears, throwing herself into Alex's arms. "Alex, I didn't mean to upset her. I don't know why she's misunderstanding us like this." Alex patted her on the back absent-mindedly, saying, "It's not your fault. It's hers. I'll make her apologize to you someday. I'll have her do whatever you want to make it right." Hearing this, I rolled my eyes so hard they nearly got stuck. "I can apologize to her right now," I said. Emily's face lit up with expectation, and I smiled coldly before delivering 2 sharp slaps to her cheeks. Then, in a mockingly sweet tone, I said, "I'm sorry, my dear sister." Alex's face turned red with anger, and for a moment, I thought he might hit me. But in the end, he held back. As I had predicted, for all his flaws, Alex had a principle. He didn't hit women. For the next 2 days, he completely ignored me, treating me as if I didn't exist. For the past few days, Alex Smith and I barely spoke to each other. My heart, however, grew more restless as the day approached. Only 2 days were left until my planned escape. I was ready to spend these last days in peace, but everything changed on the morning of the final day. My mother-in-law suddenly showed up at the door. For the past couple of days, Alex had been bringing Emily Taylor home to eat the meals they had bought together. My plan was to feign a tantrum, storm out of the house, and head straight to the train station with my pre-packed luggage. But my mother-in-law's unexpected arrival disrupted everything. As soon as she walked in, she spotted Emily helping herself to food again. Emily's audacity was remarkable. Despite the 2 slaps I gave her earlier, she still followed Alex home. She even whispered to me smugly behind his back, "So what if you hit me? Alex still hates you." My mother-in-law, however, was visibly displeased with Emily. After some pointed and sarcastic remarks, she finally managed to drive her away. When Alex tried to intervene, my mother-in-law grabbed his arm and said, Why are you chasing after that girl? I found you the perfect wife. And you don't even appreciate her. As in my previous life, my mother-in-law adored me for being obedient and easy to control. She despised anyone she couldn't dominate. Like Emily. Seeing Alex's sullen expression, my mother-in-law pulled out $50 from her pocket. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed Emily hadn't left entirely. She had circled around to the back window and was peering in, grinning mockingly at me. My mother-in-law beamed. Oh, what a dutiful daughter-in-law. Even giving me money for my old age. Alex turned to me sharply. Where did you get that kind of money? I avoided his gaze and stammered. I saved it secretly at home. I thought I'd give it to Mom. As soon as the word give slipped out, I realized I'd made a mistake. Thankfully, my mother-in-law didn't pick up on it. She laughed heartily. You don't owe me money. What you owe me are some grandsons. You two should hurry up and get married so I can hold my grandchild soon. She then grabbed our hands, placed them together, and patted them encouragingly. You two should get along well. I won't get in your way anymore. After she left, Alex's face darkened even further. He immediately confronted me. Why would you randomly give my mother money? What scheme are you plotting? I shot back sarcastically. I'm not plotting anything. Don't assume everyone is as dirty-minded as you. I deliberately provoked him, hoping he'd leave so I could make my escape. But instead of getting angry, Alex grew unnervingly calm. He reached into his bag and placed a delicate box in front of me. I spent a long time picking this out. Don't you want to open it? The box's size and shape made it clear it was a ring. I reached out hesitantly but pulled my hand back. In my past life, I had longed for a ring, a symbol of belonging and love. But that was another life. In this one, I didn't want it. For the me who once harbored fantasies about Alex, this ring would have been a dream come true. But now, for the me who only wanted to escape, it was a shackle. If I put it on, I'd be tied to the Smith family once again, trapped in the same suffocating fate. The memory of freezing to death was still vivid. I couldn't go through that again. Noticing my hesitation, Alex's expression grew darker. But before he could say anything, a shrill voice interrupted us. What is that? Alex? Let me try it on. Normally, I found Emily's voice grating, but this time, it was music to my ears. I looked at her as if she were a savior. In what seemed like spite, Alex shoved the ring into Emily's hands. It's nothing valuable. You can have it. Emily lit up with joy, sliding the ring onto her finger. Overcome with excitement, she leaned into Alex's arms, cooing, You're so good to me, Alex. She didn't forget to throw me a triumphant glance. Sister, I'd like to spend some time alone with Alex. Why don't you go take a walk outside? Alex stared at me intently, as if waiting for my reaction. But Emily's suggestion was exactly what I wanted. Without hesitation, I nodded. I walked out of the house, pretending to be calm, closed the door behind me, and then broke into a run. I dashed to the place where I had hidden my luggage, grabbed it, and sprinted to catch the bus heading to the train station. You two can enjoy your little world together. I thought, I'm about to start a brand new life. Just as I believed everything was finally settled, ready to leave the nightmare behind, an unexpected twist occurred. I had already checked in and was waiting to board the train south. But as I stood there, snow began to fall heavily. A sense of unease crept into my heart. The murmurs around me didn't help. With snow this heavy, will the train even run? One person wondered aloud. Oh, don't jinx it. Another said, this train only runs once in a long while. So many people are waiting for it. They can't just cancel it. Their conversation amplified the growing fear in my chest. I couldn't help but imagine the worst-case scenario. What if my in-laws refused to let me leave? What if Alex, with his unreasonable behavior, dragged me back? How would I escape? Leaving without a word, after paying off every penny I owed, was the quickest way I could think of to sever ties with the Smith family. Once I reached Guangdong, no one would know me, and they'd have no way of finding me. But as long as I remained in this town, they would track me down eventually. Unfortunately, the worst did happen. The train was canceled due to the severe weather. The good news was that service would resume in 3 days. But where could I stay for the next 3 days? This rural town was so small that even the ghost houses were filled with familiar faces. Walking into one would immediately raise questions I didn't want to answer. The snow was freezing, and I had no idea how I would endure 3 days of this. I wandered aimlessly through the streets until I found a corner that was relatively hidden. There was some cover overhead to shield me from the snow. I sat there, hoping no one would notice me. But when you're unlucky, even drinking water can get stuck in your teeth. A voice I least wanted to hear called out behind me. "Oh my, Anna, why are you sitting here all by yourself?" It was my mother-in-law, scavenging the streets for discarded bottles to sell. She spotted me in the corner and immediately jumped to conclusions. "Did Alex and that woman bully you again? You're such a sweet child. Why else would you be out here in the snow? Don't worry. Come on, let's go home. I'll help you set things straight with him." Without waiting for my response, she half dragged, half pulled me toward home. On the way, my mind raced, trying to come up with another plan. I thought about confronting her right there and laying everything out. But each time I opened my mouth, the words got stuck in my throat. In my previous life, she had made things incredibly difficult for me. Yet in this life, she now seemed so protective and kind. Human nature truly is complex. When we reached the door, I hesitated to go inside. But then, muffled, intimate sounds came from within. My mother-in-law's face darkened immediately. She fumbled for her key, unlocked the door, and stormed inside, pointing at the scene in front of her. She stammered in outrage. "Why you two? How could you do something like this? It's disgraceful. You shameless woman. How dare you seduce my son? He's about to get married." But Emily's voice was louder than my mother-in-law's. "It's not my fault. It's Alex. He forced himself on me. Your family has to take responsibility for this. I'm still an innocent woman." I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. Alex looked flustered the moment he saw me, while my mother-in-law gave me an awkward smile. "Good girl. Don't worry. I'll make sure Alex never gets close to that woman again." But then, Emily grabbed the fruit knife from the table and held it to her neck. "My reputation is ruined now. If Alex doesn't marry me, I have no reason to live. If I die, Alex will end up in jail, too." The situation had escalated, and now everyone's interests were at stake. Alex Smith, who had been silent until now, finally stepped forward and declared, "I'll marry you, Emily." My mother-in-law immediately chimed in, almost as if taking his side, while looking at me with feigned regret. "Oh, everyone says we've wronged you," she said, pulling out the $50 I had forced on her earlier. "Take this money. Just don't talk about it outside. Okay, good girl." I understood that this was essentially hush money. However, I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. The problem I had been agonizing over during my journey was resolved so easily. Feigning a pitiful look, I nodded in agreement and told everyone present that I was planning to leave town for a few days and would stay home for 3 more before departing. But on the afternoon before my planned departure, Alex seemed to realize something. He suddenly grabbed my wrist, his expression frantic, and demanded, "Have you been planning to leave me all along? Do you not care about me at all?" I replied bluntly, "You're the one who did something wrong. Why are you turning it around on me?" Alex's face crumbled into an expression of despair as he slowly loosened his grip on my wrist. "So I really am losing you," he muttered to himself. I ignored his uncharacteristic reaction and fled the house. I didn't have the time or energy to analyze his behavior. All I cared about was leaving that home for good and avoiding any further mishaps. This time, I finally escaped the nightmare of my past life. The journey south went smoothly, and there were no more surprises. When I arrived in Guangdong and reunited with my cousin, we took stock of my finances. Using part of the money my mother-in-law had returned to me, I was able to redeem my late mother's keepsake. It was the last thing she had left me, and I wanted to keep it close as a reminder of her. But as I counted my money, I noticed something strange. There was an additional $80 tucked inside one of my books. After thinking it over, I realized it must have been Alex who slipped it in. I couldn't help but smile wryly and decided to accept it without guilt. I treated it as compensation for the emotional damage he caused in my previous life. Nothing more than half a year's salary for him. After all, strangely, Alex started sending me letters, written in his parents' names. The letters described mundane details of his life with Emily, always comparing her unfavorably to me. If I hadn't studied Alex's handwriting so carefully in my past life, I wouldn't have realized the truth. I didn't understand why he was doing this. But it didn't matter. It didn't affect my new life or my ambitions. My cousin and I worked in a garment factory for 3 years, spending our evenings studying for college entrance exams. Like me, she was ambitious, and we both dreamed of getting into design school and starting our own business. Perhaps because I endured all the hardships in my past life, this one went incredibly smoothly. I was accepted into my dream program, graduated successfully, and found an investor for our business. We rode the wave of the booming era, and our clothing line became a nationwide sensation. In an age when televisions and refrigerators were still considered luxuries, I managed to buy myself a car with my own earnings. Truly, the saying was right. After leaving a toxic man, even the air you breathe smells sweeter. But of course, life always throws in a few annoyances. One day, while picking up medicine at the hospital, I ran into Alex and Emily. I quickly pretended not to recognize them, slipped into my car, and drove off without a backward glance. I wanted to stay as far away from their bad luck as possible. Still, my cousin couldn't resist gossiping about them. From her chatter, I learned that Emily had become extremely jealous and possessive after marriage, causing Alex to struggle at work. He'd been forced to leave several positions and had finally been transferred to Guangdong. But even here, her unreasonable behavior had started causing trouble, and it seemed like Alex might lose this job too. Before long, Alex's mother suffered a stroke, just as she had in my previous life. Emily mistreated and abused her, and when Alex found out, he immediately divorced her. Emily Taylor reportedly took a large portion of the family's assets when she and Alex Smith divorced. However, her fate wasn't much better. She was eventually swindled by a rich playboy and ended up penniless, wandering the streets. As for Alex, after visiting a monastery, he seemed to lose his sanity. He kept muttering apologies and repeatedly saying things like, "I'm sorry. I failed you." But none of this had anything to do with me anymore. From that point on, every day of my life was bright and full of promise. Alex Smith's perspective. The first time I saw Anna Shin wasn't the day my mother brought her home and declared her to be my bride. It was long before that, when she was still a child. I was being reckless and jumped off a hill, injuring myself. Anna, with her twin braids and a height barely reaching my shoulders, helped me bandage my wound and supported me as we walked down the hill together. She didn't seem to recognize me later, but I remembered her. I was kind to her, often bringing colleagues home for meals, hoping to see her get jealous or show she cared about me. But she never did. Each time, she would warmly host Emily Taylor, treating her with meticulous care, as though I didn't matter. She never once expressed any displeasure, and it felt like I meant nothing to her. One day, I came home to find her completely different. Her eyes no longer followed me like they used to, and I couldn't figure out what she was focused on. She spent her days scribbling on the calendar, marking something important. Something deep inside told me this wasn't right. I tried to please her, sometimes even provoking her, just to see her reaction. On the night she'd marked with bold red on her calendar, I pushed her too far, and she left in anger. I was confident she'd come back soon. So, Emily and I entered the bedroom. I couldn't stop myself. I never expected Anna to truly want to leave me, but her departure felt so natural, like something inevitable that I couldn't stop. All I could do was watch her leave. Emily and I were later transferred to the provincial capital, while Anna headed south alone. I didn't see her for a long time. I wrote her letters in my parents' names, hoping for a reply, but she never responded. Eventually, I was transferred to Guangdong. Shortly after moving there, I had a vivid dream. In the dream, Anna and I got married, but after she became pregnant, I abandoned her to go to the provincial capital alone. I had planned to take her with me, but her behavior disappointed me. As I got busier with work, I started neglecting my family. Was I truly so busy? No matter where I went, I always brought Emily along. She was young, beautiful, and sweet. Gradually, I felt a stronger connection to her. Even when my son came to live with me, he preferred Emily. I kept convincing myself, yes, I've always loved Emily. It was never Anna. When my son got married, we didn't inform Anna. And to my surprise, she didn't make a fuss. But when I saw her again, she told me she wanted a divorce. I insulted her with the vilest words I could muster. How dare she suggest divorcing me? I let my son lock her in a cold room. I stayed in the adjacent room, waiting to hear her beg for mercy. But the entire night passed in silence. When I finally went in the next day, all that was left was her cold, lifeless body. In that moment, I was shaken awake. I called out her name, Anna Schön. Before I could stop myself, Emily's annoyed voice broke through my panic. What's wrong with you? Are you itching for a beating? Calling out another woman's name. Yes, I had married Emily. Perhaps everything I just experienced was nothing more than a dream. But was it really? Thinking back to Anna's actions, I couldn't be sure. I never expected to see her again in my lowest moments. By then, Emily had started accusing me of having an affair with a female colleague, causing a scene at work. The department, fed up with the drama, fired us both. But Emily still wouldn't let it go. Emily threw a tantrum at the entrance, screaming and rolling on the ground. It was at that moment that I saw her, Anna Schön. She was driving a luxury car, dressed impeccably in stylish, high-end clothing. I had heard that she had studied hard and gotten into college. After graduating, she and her friends started a business, which was now thriving. She had clearly risen far above the struggles that Emily and I faced, endlessly stuck in a pit of misery, dragging each other down. I saw her many times after that, but I never had the courage to approach her. I could only watch from afar. The man I am now no longer deserves to be anywhere near her. Later, my father passed away, and my mother became bedridden. Emily, far from taking care of her, began abusing her instead. Unable to endure it any longer, I demanded a divorce. Despite her relentless attempts to keep me tied to her, I left with nothing, taking only the responsibility of caring for my mother. One day, I visited a renowned temple nearby to pray for Anna. I hoped that her life in this reincarnation would be smooth and filled with happiness. While hanging a prayer plaque, I noticed a familiar handwriting. Anna's handwriting. It was a little childish, but every stroke carried such serious intent. Her prayer read, I hope I can spend my entire life far away from Alex Smith, who brought me endless pain in my past life. A sharp pain pierced my heart, so it wasn't a dream after all.